welcome back everybody after the tea break. And I would like to acknowledge the presence of Honorary Secretary General, CIAP 2024, Dr. Yogesh Parekh. He's come here to attend the CME specially all the way from there. Requesting Dr. Nitin Shah sir to kindly come up on stage and felicitate sir.
Thank you, Nehal Madam, Nitin Bhai, Bipin Bhai, Vijay Bhai, and all the pediatricians of the Mumbai IAP. Thank you very much for honor. Thank you.
Kind attention, please. Now we are back to the science. And I hope after that refreshing tea break, we are in a mood of, listening to our experts yet again. And for this Bomb It Again session, we have none other than my teacher, Dr. Rajesh Chokhani sir. He'll be moderating the session. And the panelists are Dr. Nitin Shah sir. I would like to invite our panelists, Dr. Nitin Shah sir, Dr. Jaideep Chaudhary sir, and Dr. Rohit Agarwal sir. Mind it, we have experts from East and the West. And although none of them need any introduction, Dr. Jaideep Chaudhary sir has specially come from Kolkata. He's the professor at ICH Kolkata and very renowned in infectious diseases. We also have Dr. Rohit Agarwal sir. He's our very own illustrious pediatrician, senior consultant pediatrician from Mumbai. Has been the national president of IAP as well. I invite Rajesh Chokhani sir to take it forward.
A very good morning to one and all. Again, so some of these vaccines we had discussed just last year, but then some of you might have seen this sign somewhere that trespassers will be shot, but more importantly, survivors will be shot again. So the message is, chhodenge nahi. And in the same vein, forgetters will be taught again. Now, most of the people were listening to the lectures in pin drop silence, but I heard a few murmurs. D for delegates were saying, Meri bhi awaaz suno. So now, this session, all the basic stuff you delegates will be talking, revising, answering very fast. Otherwise, Nehal is going to confiscate your lunch coupons. Because she was part of the teaching faculty last time. And for the vexing issues, we will leave it to these three bosses, right? So let's start with the first vaccine, that's the JE vaccine. How many of you use JE vaccine routinely? Very good. When do you use it?
After first year of age. 2 doses at 1 month interval.
Which vaccine?
2 vaccines. One has a 3 microgram and 6 microgram. The other one is 6 microgram. One is Jeev and one is Genvac.
Okay. Who doesn't use JE vaccine routinely? Okay. Why you don't use it?
I thought it is not endemic in this area.
Because it is not endemic in Mumbai. So now the problem, panelists, is that should it be offered to all? Mumbai is not endemic, but Navi Mumbai is endemic, and we are like a step away from each other. So Joydeep, I think in West Bengal there's a lot of JE, so you tell us what to do.
Yeah, actually, thank you again for this such a wonderful initiative. Now, initially JE was introduced in districts of northern part of West Bengal. Then gradually whole of West Bengal was covered. Now it's throughout West Bengal and in more than half of the districts of India. Now as per the recommendation, it's best that we follow the government schedule about the JE vaccination in those districts where it's given routinely, the private practitioners ideally should give. But there is a caveat also. If their proximal places are JE endemic and they are receiving JE vaccine, it's better to give JE vaccine to the neighboring districts. Say Navi Mumbai. Navi Mumbai JE vaccine is given, but Mumbai is in close proximity and say Dr. Vijay Vele has driven down from Navi Mumbai to Mumbai, 2 mosquitoes might have come with him.
Must have come.
Might have come.
They have come.
Yeah.
He means the mosquitoes in his car, huh?
Yeah.
Don't take it otherwise.
So,
Inadvertently.
no, so not only 2 mosquitoes came, they were both female mosquitoes.
And Navi Mumbai has always been exporting mosquitoes to Mumbai, particularly to Ghatkopar, where I am from. Just only a little patch of marshy land full of breeding ground of other mosquitoes.
Yeah. Leaving aside, there is so much. Besides, there is so much movement. Actually, people are moving from non-endemic to endemic places, and JE being such an important disease which is preventable. So definitely in the proximal places, and definitely due to extensive travel that the people are undertaking nowadays, it's a 2-dose schedule only, 1 month apart. That 1 month can be extended, but should be given.
So I have a take on this vaccine this way, that you need marshy land, the paddy fields, etc., pigs around, animals around, wedding birds, etc., which is not typical of a huge metro like say Bengaluru or Mumbai. That's why Mumbai, Bengaluru have escaped major cases of JE, though there have been very occasional reported cases. But now we know that the mosquitoes can actually travel 3 to 4 kilometers on their own and on the subjects of cars and things like that for miles together. So I almost feel that we are very proximal, and it was initially Panvel, then it came to Navi Mumbai, Thane, and now Mumbai is the next target. So I have just started introducing this vaccine in my day-to-day practice. I'll be very frank, I never had JE vaccine on my vaccination folder, but I have purchased few doses, I am exposing people and leaving it to them to decide. So the answer is yes, I have started giving this vaccine in my practice. And that's only for the reason that they have taken everything and they keep on asking that is there any other vaccine left? And it's not fair not to tell them about JE vaccine, especially it's a matter of time. Tomorrow suddenly after 3 months there's an explosion of JE in our area, and if you are not exposed to the parents, I think it's a disservice to the parents.
So I think our panelists suggest that we should all start using it, whether endemic or not endemic, right? Proximal to the endemic districts. Rohit sir, how does a pediatrician find out which area is endemic?
You see, there are already 368 districts being published, so everybody, all of us, we know which are these districts. And one should know, a practicing pediatrician, which district is practicing and which are the surrounding areas which is going to cover. And based on that, as Nitin bhai very rightly said, like I am practicing Ghatkopar, which is very close to New Bombay. All flamingos, from here to there, flamingo is the really place for New Bombay. And I really strongly feel that though I admit that I have not yet started, I only counsel my patient. I give them information because this is my duty as a pediatrician. And decision is done because legally make some time arise, I am selling or I am pushing this vaccine for the commercial reason. So, but I am keeping few. When patients say, I give it.
Yeah, so
Till
Rohit
it becomes
sir,
legally, becomes a endemic and stamped by the government authorities. By the
see, Rohit sir, the problem is when you say decision is yours to the parents. I think all of us get mothers who say that doctor, I trust you more than my husband. You tell me what to do.
Only for vaccine, I suppose.
Only for vaccine, huh? Yes, yes. In that circumstance, I'll definitely say you must take.
Okay.
So I will just add that in my mind, the conviction is more to use JE more than meningococcal. And I have ordered some dose of JE, not meningococcal, except for the high risk. So that's the bottom line of my thinking about the JE vaccine.
Sure. Okay.
Especially when it is cost effective.
Yeah.
And it's known that 2 doses will give you almost a very long-term protection.
So the number of doses the product insert is mentioning.
I'm coming to that, Kamlesh. Yeah. So any one of you is using Genvac by Bharat Biotech, or because Kamlakar talked of 3 microgram, 6 microgram, which is Jeev. So, okay. So Genvac 1 dose or 2 doses? 2 doses. Okay. Anyone else? Okay. So,
1 dose.
Sorry? Right now it's not available. That's because the government has lapped it up like anything. So it will be available soon. But Panelists, so what about the efficacy of the vaccine? 1 dose, 2 dose, what should we do?
So there has been no field efficacy trial with either G or Genvac, to be very frank. They have been licensed based on non-inferiority on the immunological comparison, as I said in my PCV talk, with the original SA1442 Chinese vaccine, which was a live vaccine, which was used by public health in India for years, and that had a lot of efficacy trial in India and outside. But just to tell you, the Chinese vaccine, SA1442, 1 dose was enough in most of the countries, including in Nepal, with 6-year long-term follow-up. But for peculiar reason in our country, 1 dose had efficacy of only 50 to 60%. And that's why when the second dose was introduced by the government along with the second MR, then the studies which have been done from Hyderabad and from the Northeast have shown case control trial that the efficacy went up to 90%. So that is a good vaccine. When you use 2 doses in our country, almost 90% efficacy. Genvac was tried with SA1442, 2 dose versus 1 dose, because that time SA1442 was just 1 dose, and it was found to be superior, very faster, and a very high level of antibody. But the antibody, subsequently 1 dose Genvac trial also were done, which showed that the immunogenicity is excellent with more than 98% seroconversion titers being very high. But the titers do fall by 2 years, and seroconversion also falls by 2 years to 60-65%. Whether that would mean disease, we don't know. Just to be doubly sure and not to avoid any confusion, because both products are used in national program, government has said whichever product you use, you will use 2 doses. So I think we should stick to 2 doses. And
Sure.
that will solve all the issues about 1 and 2. And when you use the second dose, of course, the Bharat Biotech did a study of Genvac versus SA1442, where they gave 2 dose, 1 dose, and then they switch for the booster.
Correct,
And they
correct.
found that even if you use 1 dose of Genvac or pure 2 doses, this immunity was better than using a single SA1442 as a part of the program. So cutting the long answer short, if you use 2 doses, that is a sure shot as far as the effectiveness for long term is concerned.
Sure. Joydeep, now that these antibodies seem to fall with time, what about boosters? And also keeping in mind that we know that there's a lot of asymptomatic infection in the community. So if that is so, will that serve as natural boosters?
Yeah, as of now, there is no recommendation for a 3rd dose. That is, 2 doses are enough, no recommendation for a booster. And basically, this is India is endemic, and most of the places are endemic. So there is definitely natural boosting. So boosters, as of now, are not recommended or required. Maybe in future when we have some different ideas or studies. But as of now, 2 doses, no boosters.
So Rajesh bhai, what has happened is after using JE vaccine in the national program in districts which are highly endemic, and you ask that question, how do you know it's endemic? You know it's endemic when the government or the local municipal office start giving the vaccine in your area, so it's endemic. There's a shift to the right of the age at which JE happens during non-outbreak. Outbreak, the adults can also get infected. So at least 28 districts, now adult vaccination program has been started. So while a booster may not be required, definitely adults will need a JE in a highly endemic area once childhood vaccination is successful in removing children as the source of JE vaccine.
Sure. So I think 2 clear messages. One is we'll use 2 doses and we will start using it even if we are not endemic. That's right. Any questions on JE, or we move to the next vaccine?
Rajesh,
Yeah.
so one point I would like to add, that curiously, DCGI has licensed this vaccine for 1 dose only, because there were some phase 4 trials were there, and in that they saw that 1 dose is sufficient. I mean, to long term.
No, so that's what, Rohit sir. They license saying that 1 dose is good enough. But now to avoid confusion, let's use 2 doses.
There are 2 doses, but then it is licensed for 1 dose.
Yeah, so the thing is that the licensing authority has licensed Genvac as 1 dose, but the government itself is using 2 doses of Genvac or G, whichever is used in the public health.
Exactly.
And the vaccines are in short supply because there's a tremendous demand for JE vaccine in the country. It's not that because it is not found to be good, etc. And as I understand, we have Mr. Mihir Shaya from Bharat Biotech here. He has promised that by July beginning,
I think 10th July roughly.
yeah, so how Rotavec 5D came back because there was a huge transition, Genvac also will be made available in the next, yeah.
2 months it's a 70-day qualification cycle at CDL Kasoli.
Correct.
So since 2 months it's at CDL Kasoli, we are just awaiting for the release.
Correct.
Yeah.
So which is the vaccine used in the government schedule?
Both are used.
So
now SA1442 is
that
given
is
up,
given
phased
up.
out. Last 3 years, only both the vaccines are used depending upon availability and outbreak response, etc.
Yeah,
Sir.
Manish, one sec, question your
One
Manish.
question, my area is not endemic. If I give JE vaccine, how long it will protect? Because there is no natural boosting to it. So I am justified in giving the vaccine?
So as on today, the data suggests that the at least 4 or 5 years long-term studies show that the antibodies persist at much higher level than the cutoff which is required. So that's a question that will be answered only in the coming next few decades. But in the areas where JE vaccine is used since 2006, when I was the president, for the first time in 8 districts, the JE vaccines were used. In fact, 2 of them were using the old mouse-brain vaccine, and 6 of them switched to SA14-14-2. There has been no breakthrough disease in children who have been vaccinated. Now, how many years? 6 to 24
Yeah,
is
so I think there
18
must
years.
be some boosting happening
Yes,
which we are not
possible.
aware of as yet.
Correct.
Yeah, there was a question there. Yeah, please give the mic there.
Sir.
Yeah.
Sir, what about the dosage? Means 3 micrograms, 6 micrograms?
Yeah, so 1 to 3 years, 3 microgram, more than 3 years, 6 microgram.
That's for G. Genvac is the dose is the same.
Standard dose, right? Any contraindications?
Any anaphylaxis to previous dose, that's the only contraindication. And someone asked upper age, there's no upper age limit. I think the studies were done even in adults, and it's being used in adults. So 45 years is the cutoff.
Just a little comment. I think making a statement that you're adjacent to a J endemic district, so give everyone, I think it's not that simple.
Not give one, offer. You don't expose also because it's not there.
The
discuss.
dividing line between give and offer is very, very thin.
No, so
Yes,
like
yes.
I expose them to meningococcal. Moment they hear the price, they say thank you.
No, I'll just give you a few facts. Kolar is adjacent. We share a border with Bangalore urban. Last 30 years, not a single indigenous JE case in Bangalore. So what does this mean? Just adjacent does not mean much. Please remember, humans are dead-end hosts. So the virus cannot be transmitted from humans to others. So if an infected person is traveling between 2 areas, endemic and non-endemic, he cannot carry the virus and infect the population. Second, for JE to be transmitted, you require a lot of environmental conditions. Open spaces where the mosquitoes can breed, you need the intermediate hosts. Okay? Now, Bangalore studies have shown that the mosquitoes are not JE transmitting type. So you require that also. Another thing, interesting thing which has been found is the cattle to pig ratio. Tamil Nadu, Tanjavur is a district which is very adjacent to a highly endemic district, Nellore. In Nellore, the cattle-pig ratio is in favor of pigs. Pigs are transmitting agents. In Tanjavur, the cattle-to-pig ratio is 240 to 1. So, large number of cattle. For some reason, the JE mosquitoes prefer cattle to pigs in such a situation. Cattle is a dead-end host, so it cannot transmit. So, I think before we make a blanket statement and say that you should give or offer to everyone, I think all these factors have to be taken into consideration. Thank you.
No, but
So that's
I
the
think
science. That's
as
the
a
science.
moderator, I'll
That's
take
the
a call
science.
here.
That's the science behind discussing how you will take a public health policy. Right. That's perfectly fine. That's how the public health policies are decided as to suddenly how one district is declared as endemic based on the cases and based on the mosquitoes. But in the private practice, that answer will always elude because you're not going to look at all this, what Dr. Kasi said. It might be simpler to say that at least do not say that, no, it's not required, you don't have to take it. I mean, that's the, and when you say that you probably will need it, you will stock 1 or 2 doses. I have only 2 or 3 doses which may expire before using. I'm not saying I'm going to give it to everyone. But to say no, I will not give, same is for meningococcal, also is not correct.
Sure. I think we'll move
Sir,
on.
The dosing is 2 dosages across all ages. Okay,
Yes.
thanks.
Yeah, last question.
So unfortunately, there are children who had received only single dose of a Genvac, and they are now 2.5 years away from the first dose. So what do we do about them?
You can give them the G vaccine or wait for the Genvac to be available. Fortunately,
I mean to say even if the Genvac is available in July, they are saying.
Correct.
So should we just give 1 dose, or do we have to repeat the schedule?
No, you just 1 dose because fortunately the immune system doesn't know the brand. It only knows how to react to an antigen.
No, so the question, you can give 1 more dose to complete the 2-dose schedule. Yeah. We'll move on to the typhoid conjugate vaccine. Everyone is using it. Anybody who is not using the typhoid vaccine? Anybody who is not using? Okay. You are using at what age? When do you give the typhoid conjugate vaccine? I hear 9 months. Anything else? 6 months. Anything else? 8 months. Okay. Question to panelists is, we have not yet introduced Pani Puri as the first complementary feed. Then why typhoid conjugate vaccine at 6 months? Or can it be given later? Should it be given only at 6 months? Some practitioners say, abhi bahut vaccine hai, thoda baad mein denge. There is a gap that time. Rohit sir.
See, it was basically typhoid was a disease of the school-going age. 4 years to 15 years was the maximum burden. But the studies have shown that is substantial, around 30% cases occur in the first year of the life. Breastfeeding is not nowadays the era of formula milk, everybody. So we cannot say that the children are really safe or they are because of the breastfeeding and all that. Now in Bombay and others are part of our surrounding areas, typhoid is being seen very frequently under 1 year of age. 6 months is the licensing period when is being licensed. But if you give little early, probably 9 months is the period or the cutoff where the immune system is matured enough to take the vaccine and give the better antibodies titers in the life. So probably 9, 10 or that between 9 to 12 months, that's the period, optimum period.
So 6 to 9 is the time when you should try to give it. Try to not delay it too much because you do see typhoid before 1 year. Fine?
Right.
Okay. Now, Nitin bhai, can clinicians scientifically choose one product over another? Is the conjugation process important?
So, conjugation process is something which the scientists actually will delve into more, and that will make it more immunogenic, less reactogenic, and easy to make cost point of view. But I think from the clinician's point of view, I would use a vaccine which has data. So it should be immunologically non-inferior. If possible, WHO pre-qualify, but then what I have to look into, already some expert in WHO have seen, and a product which has more field efficacy trials. I mean, it's as simple as that. So many vaccines are licensed which are WHO pre-qualified. Like 2 of Indian vaccines, in fact, there are only Indian vaccines which are typhoid conjugate vaccine. Out of the 3 or 4, 2 are WHO pre-qualified, and of which 1 has not 1 but 9 field efficacy trials. So that makes us have a strong confidence in using these vaccines. So when in fact the typhoid conjugate vaccines came, there was doubt as to whether it will work because there were no data from any international studies. But now we cannot complain because we have not 1 but several studies, which makes us very confident that the efficacy is anywhere from 80 to 90%, which is now going on for 4 to 5 years.
Sure. Joydeep, there has always been a debate going on for typhoid conjugate. 1 dose is enough, 2 doses. What is your take on this?
I will support you. Kasi will not. Kasi will not.
Well, actually the 1 dose recommendation that was made by ACVIP was based on some study which showed the persistence of antibody till 5 years after 1 dose. Considering that there will be some natural boosting because typhoid is endemic country. But see, for all the conjugated vaccine, we are giving more than 1 doses for all the conjugate. And the other reason was that typhoid is an inoculum-based disease, so there might be clinical typhoid, culture-proven typhoid, even after a single dose or even after 2 doses also. As per ACVIP, it's single dose. But as a conjugate vaccine, a second dose maybe after about second birthday is advisable in countries like India, but even if there is culture positive typhoid, never a 3rd dose. At the same point of time, I would like to mention one more thing which you didn't ask. Some people have the habit of using 1 polysaccharide vaccine followed by 1 conjugate, or 1 conjugate and then a polysaccharide above 2 years. That's useless.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So my take is very simple, that show me 1 vaccine which is against bacterial disease, which is single dose starting at 6 months of age, giving you 50 years or 60 years of efficacy. I have not seen a single vaccine. Except hepatitis A vaccine, most of the vaccine need repeated doses or boosters. That's the general immunological principle.
So I get your point.
Yeah,
Nitin
no,
bhai.
the most important point, that there is a study done from Malawi, which has now looked at 4-year long-term data in children who received as young as 6 months to 12 months, and older children also were there, and the efficacy at the end of 4 years is still around 60-70%, but the confidence intervals are 6 to 90. And the 6 will touch 0, I'm sure, in the next 6 months.
Absolutely.
Which means that younger age group, which have received the first dose, which all of us are giving at 6, 9 months, 12 months, would need a booster. And probably that booster should be best given at 4 to 5 years after the first dose. And that's what I do in my practice, that I give 2 doses, but at least 3 to 4 years apart.
Sure. So I think the final word on booster or no booster is still to be said. This debate will continue. But we must remember that the public and private recommendations will always be different. So when WHO says 1 dose is enough, it is trying to cover a large number of people. On an individual basis, as I said, the final word is still to be said. Nitin bhai, should adults, parents of our child patients be encouraged to take it?
Yeah, so I mean, typhoid can happen in any age group, and there is study done by the Bharat Biotech's vaccine of immunological study up to 65 years. So they have a recently published data of 18 to 65-year-old, and they have shown that very high seroconversion and titer. So as you are going to delve into unsafe water and food practices in our country, no matter what you do, and I mean, again, off the record, even after the Pedicon 2003 in Renaissance, we had several complaints of delegates developing typhoid thereafter.
We have many conferences in that list.
So forget. So I hope that doesn't happen after this conference, and I hope people have taken their typhoid vaccine. So that's why you should take typhoid vaccine at any age. But adults may need only 1 dose,
Sure.
and they don't need 2 doses.
Sure, sure.
In fact, I had typhoid myself at the age of 65, and I did take the vaccine after that,
Sure.
So adults should be, encouraged to take the vaccine.
So Bipin sir, as Nitin bhai said, the final data is not clear, but maybe 2-3 years later, yeah. So 2-3 years later is a better.
Just to add to what I said, there are serious deliberation happening by Dr. Krishna Mohan from Bharat Biotech. He's one of the members of the task force to convince WHO and international authority. They're looking at this 4-year Malawi data, which is almost showing a non-significant protection from 4th year onwards. Probably WHO will change its position and make it 2 doses in the next 6 months to 1 year time, whenever they meet to discuss typhoid conjugate vaccine.
Right. WHO has really given a recommendation of 1 dose because in the developing countries, again, cost may be one factor, and because of the endemicity, the natural boosting may be there. That's the reason the WHO has given in its position paper in 2018, 1 dose is sufficient, and probably IAP is taking over the. But still in 2018, last 2020 IAP ACIP committee, they had given the 2nd dose is a grey and still can be given in the future maybe.
Sure, sure. Okay, now let's move on to tuberculosis. So, question to audience. If BCG scar is not seen, what do you do? Sorry?
If after 6 months it's still not seen, you repeat the BCG.
Okay, you repeat the BCG. Any other view? Don't repeat. Fight ho gaya idhar. So, Jaideep, repeat or no repeat? Fast. We'll have to go fast. We'll try and save 10 minutes in this session.
And if you don't see a scar after the 2nd dose, change the pediatrician.
See, BCG scar is not a proof of immunity against BCG because scar may not develop, but as per ACVIP recommendation and everything, that we wait till 6 months. If there is no scar, we repeat once. If there is still no scar, we don't repeat it.
Absolutely.
And yeah, sometimes it's given subcutaneously.
Sure. So whether you repeat or don't, you may be right both ways. How do you manage BCG lymphadenitis? Aspirate and send for gene expert? Thoda louder, no? Okay. And how do you manage it? What do you do? Give AKT? Okay, fine. They are all good. So let's move to the actual things. What about newer TB vaccines being tried? Anybody?
So we know BCG at best has prevention of serious forms of tuberculosis in children up to the age of 4 or 5 years. After that, whether it protects against adult TB or a reactivation in the same child when he becomes adult to develop adult TB, the answer is very difficult to answer. Previously, we used to say based on only one single Chingalput trial that it has 0 efficacy against adult TB, but that's not true. There are several studies which have looked at effect of BCG on adult reactivation, and they have found efficacy as varying from 10 to 70%. That's the reason why now children who have not received BCG as a child are actually said to give BCG even up to adolescent, that is 15 years. But we need better vaccine to prevent adult tuberculosis, and that's why there are not one but 17 vaccines have been tried in the different parts of the world, of which 2 have actually shown a phase 3 efficacy data. One is the M72 by GSK, which was given to people who are EGRA positive and had past TB, and to prevent reactivation, it was found to be 50% effective with 2 doses. That's an excellent subunit vaccine. Further trials are going on. The RBCG, the recombinant BCG by serum, is again being tried for prevention of adult reactivation, prevention of TB from a contact of a TB patient, and to replace BCG in neonates. Now all these 3 phase 3 data are still not out, but what data is available, it shows it's at least immunologically not inferior and definitely safer, less chance of BCG reaction, less chance of BCG lymphadenitis. So these are 2 or 3 vaccines, and the SRL 170 that you are talking about, actually that's a one which is very difficult to produce commercially. So a derivative of that, I forget the name, it starts with something M.
DR1
So that's being tried. So these are the 3 vaccines which are in the forefront, and I am sure we are awaiting those data. So of this, the RBCG trials are going on in India are in adults to prevent reactivation in those who had past TB, and to prevent TB transmission to contacts of a patient with TB. And in South Africa, a huge trial going on in newborn to replace BCG with RBCG. So they are comparing both, and this data will be very exciting to see. And lastly, there is one MTB vac, which is not bovine TB. This BCG is a bovine tuberculosis organism which is live attenuated. It loses 30 to 40% of the epitopes of T receptor, whereas if you use actual tuberculosis organism and you deactivate it genetically by deleting some genes which are the ones which are pathogenic genes, then you can have a MTB which has more repertoire of T receptor, and that is the MTB vac which now Bharat Biotech is going to looking into study. Phase 1 and phase 2 are over, phase 3 is on the way, and then MTB vac which has been done internationally, it's a vaccine I think from Spain, Biofibri from Spain. It has shown very promising results in the international arena. So I think that's one vaccine which also I am looking forward to.
An incident, yeah.
One who has received BCG, and recently probably TB Gold was done, and child is on immunosuppressive treatment, whether the prophylaxis of INH to be given or not.
Absolutely, they have to be given INH prophylaxis. It's not only that, even if he's immunocompetent and he's going to USA and he's like IGRA is positive, XA is normal, he's given INH prophylaxis. Yeah, so I would just repeat that if someone is IGRA positive or MT positive, going abroad to study will be put on INH prophylaxis if the X-ray is clear, and will be treated as TB if the X-ray shows some shadows.
Sure. Incidentally, RBC technology is used for many other infections, being tried for other infections. So we all know that BCG gives a good Th1 response. So they are trying to tag BCG with other antigens and against other infections and see if they can do
just
something.
Word of caution, do not confuse RBCG, BCG, MTBV, etc. with the onco-BCG. Onco-BCG is a very heavy dose, used only in cancer patient for bladder cancer, etc. for local infiltration. You give onco-BCG to someone as a BCG, you will have massive trouble. And do not give BCG by mistake intramuscular. I get at least once in 2-3 months a call that instead of hepatitis B, which was loaded, they gave BCG intramuscularly 0.5 ml. And for sure, there will be a cold abscess there and a regional lymphadenitis. So please avoid these mistakes.
So the dose recommended in the product insert is 0.05 ml.
I dare any pediatrician here to give exactly 0.05 ml, or for that may even 0.1 ml.
So why it should not be changed? I mean,
so I give it by the bleb form. If I form a bleb of 5 millimeters or 6 millimeters, that's where I stop.
So that dose needs to be changed in the product insert. It's
no, product insert will go specifically as per their recommendation because they can't change. But you can deviate from the product insert based on your experience. But I am really telling you, try to give in a struggling child, a struggling mother, and equally struggling and a shaky pediatrician while giving BCG.
Okay, let's move on. Let's move on. Audience, post-exposure prophylaxis. What is the schedule you use? Anybody? 5 doses? Anybody is using 4 doses?
4.
Everybody is using 5. 4? Okay, good. Why? Good. Okay, there's a recommendation to use 4. Why is everybody using 5? Oh, if dog is alive, 3 are enough.
Post-exposure.
Okay. So, Rohit sir, quickly, we have to
very
finish.
quickly.
Yeah.
I think I'll advise that one should remain with the old schedule of 5 doses. 4 doses is been recommended by ACVIP and also the other agencies in view of, because to cut the cost cutting and seeing that studies have shown that 4 doses should be sufficient. But the product insert and DCGI still says it's a 5 doses, and medico-legal it can be arise a problem. So I very sincerely in my practice I use 5 doses.
So pre-exposure will be 3 and not 2.
No, pre-exposure will be 3 and 5 this will be 5.
Okay. Now, somebody said that if the dog is fine after 10 days, then you skip the further doses, so 3 doses. Is that practice still recommended? So few years back, it used to be practiced that, okay, you start the post-exposure prophylaxis 037. On day 10, if the dog is fine, that means dog didn't have rabies, that means your whole journey was wrong, so you abandon the journey.
No, still I think one should stick around to 5 doses.
Okay.
So,
It's a lethal disease.
I must tell you that there have been case reports as recent as recently that someone got bitten by a pet dog and the pet dog was vaccinated and the person also was vaccinated and yet he died of rabies.
1 minute. How many of you have pets at home? Pet dogs, cats, whatever. How many of you, those who have taken pre-exposure prophylaxis? You've not taken. You've taken. Okay. Anybody else? You've taken pre-exposure prophylaxis? Okay. So now the question to Jaideep is, should pet owners take pre-exposure prophylaxis and they keep getting bitten again and again? So should they keep taking those 2 doses every few months after 3-month period is over?
I'll just tell you a very small real story last year happened. A very celebrity actress in Kolkata, she has 3 pet dogs and well trained, everything looked after. Every evening the maid used to take the 3 dogs for a walk. One day the dog came back and one dog had a bite mark. On questioning, the maid told the other dog had bitten. So fine, after about 7-10 days that dog became sick. So they took to a veterinary surgeon and he suggested that the dog should be admitted because there are signs of rabies. But this family refused because they are so attached to the pet and they continue to nurse the dog, feed the dog, and there is a toddler who is to kiss the dog mouth to mouth, this and that. And they were doing for the last 7-10 days also. After 7 days, the dog died. Then the maid confessed that she lied. Previously, it was a stray dog which had bitten this dog. So, taking the maid's point that it was between the dog which were vaccinated, they didn't consider the opinion of the veterinary surgeon. So now they were absolutely mad what to do. So I contacted one of the AppCry leaders and he suggested that you just continue the 5-dose schedule and all that. But somewhere they gathered that all the family members should be given IM immunoglobulin. So, with such a pressure and with, daily 4 phone calls that please give IM everything, it's a positive this and that. So I had to refer them to the AppCry people and all that. They convinced no 5 doses and for 1 month, they were literally shivering that what could happen, but 12 members of the family. So this is, I just wanted to convey because this is the story with pet dogs. You can never be sure. The dogs were very well taken care of, vaccinated, everything. So the message is clear.
Okay.
You can still tell that heroine that she can still develop rabies.
सुबह झगड़ा करके आया क्या?
She won't come to me then. She won't come back to me for routine vaccination.
Okay. Rohit bhai, can rabies be transmitted through other routes like inhalation, ingestion?
No. Actually, the rabies virus is a very, very fragile virus. It just cannot stay for a few seconds also out of the circulation and or in the other environment. So by inhalation or by even the water contaminated with something, rabid dog or any dog, which is, and few, some by mistake somebody can, I mean, there is no chance of getting that.
So
Actually, Kulkarni Ganesh is sitting here, and they had one actually case where a social service person, worker used to keep a pot of water in front of this thing, and
we'll go fast.
And
So
his
you
own
said
son
no.
drank
Yeah,
and
yeah.
No, so silver hair bats can actually transmit rabies in a caves without bite through inhalation, but that has to be very strong inoculum visiting that. Those type of bats are probably not in India, but I recently, last year when I was there, one of the south zone neurologist said that they have in one area where these bats are existing, and that's why anyone who is visiting those caves, we said that you should take an exposure prophylaxis.
Sure. Nitin bhai, how to handle disrupted schedules? So day 3 ke badle
Correct.
patient comes on day 5.
So correct. So you give the vaccine which is delayed, okay, and then from there you count the remaining days. So,
So
don't
after
restart.
day 5 vaccine, which was supposed to be day 3, I wait for 4 more days and
That's
give
right.
on day
and
7.
then
So there is another school of thought which says that finish the schedule as fast as possible to get all immunity.
Actually, that doesn't help. I mean,
Okay.
that doesn't help. The other thing, if someone has given the wrong dose, like intramuscular gluteally or something like that, then you have to repeat the dose because that's not a valid dose. And if immunoglobulins are given beyond 7 days, they are counterproductive. So again, those are the situations where it's a different thing. But or a delayed dose, suppose first dose is not given, then you can give 2 doses in the first day because that gives you a rapid seroconversion. But beyond that, it's anyone's guess.
I think this is a very commonly encountered scenario. Please remember, whether you follow 4 doses or 5 doses, the first 3 are priming doses. Aim of the priming is you require 0.5 as soon as possible. So you finish 3 doses within 10 days, irrespective of the gap between the doses. But when you're giving the 4th or 5th doses, follow the gap because those are the boosting, and there the interval between doses are important. Thank you.
Any choice between different vaccines available, Nitin bhai?
Sir, I work at a...
Mike, hold it close and do it fast.
I work at an infectious disease hospital. We get rabies cases. So for, and they eventually die. So for like every case that comes, if all precautions are followed, is a healthcare professional supposed to take post-exposure prophylaxis?
Not at all. Only veterinary doctors, those working in laboratory or carcasses, they are the ones who have to take pre-exposure and continue to take boosters and show that the titers are above 0.5. But otherwise, for these casual handlers, if you have taken universal precaution, there is no need.
Nitin bhai, quickly, any choice between different vaccines available?
Any brand which are available and licensed can be used. There is nothing to discriminate.
Any choice between
Only
different
thing,
immunoglobulins and monoclonal?
1 minute, there was a question asked that someone developed with one brand urticaria. Now what do you do? So you can change the brand next time because it may be to the excipient. But otherwise there is nothing to choose between.
Practically, Rajesh bhai, one thing, one Virorab vaccine, Virorab culture vaccine, 0.5, that is a little
easier to give.
Easier to give rather than 1 ml of the other brands.
Nitin bhai, between immunoglobulins and monoclonal antibodies.
So immunoglobulins are almost out because they are expensive, they are more reactogenic and they are not easily available. Monoclonal antibodies are in. There are 2. One is a twin rab, other is the rabi shield from serum. Both are very similar in efficacy. Only thing, the cost is different. The rabi shield is much cheaper than the twin rab. And the other thing is, when you give rabi shield or twin rab, the monoclonal antibody, human antibodies are produced in some subject, which is more with twin rab than with rabi shield. Now, you don't use these monoclonal antibodies second time generally, but in immunocompromised, every time a bite is there, if it's class 3, you have to use. That is the rare where probably rabi shield will be more safer because there are less chance of anti-monoclonal antibody produced with the previous exposure.
Audience, you all use influenza vaccines? Split variant or subunit? स्प्लिट वायरन हाथ ऊपर करो, फोटो नहीं ले रहा है.
Why split variant?
सब यूनिट हाथ ऊपर करो.
What is the difference between the two?
Why split variant?
What is the difference between the two?
अभी टाइम नहीं है, तो आप आंसर दे दो. Which one to use?
See, both the vaccine, if you see practical point of view, there is hardly any difference in
Finish.
efficacy. No, only the thing is that split viral, because there are internal proteins are there, M1, M2 and NPA, probably theoretically they are more immunogenic and may produce a little high avidity antibodies as compared to the subunits, which are less reactogenic, but almost for a practitioner, I think any vaccine is of the same.
For adults, split vaccine is definitely better than subunit vaccine because it's more immunogenic. So for us, when you take, we should take split. For children, it does not matter.
Nitin bhai, if normal children older than 5 years ask about it, how should I
Of course, I
counsel?
give it because we have seen older children with influenza-related complication. So any child who asks for any vaccine which is available, licensed for that age, you should never deny. My practice is to give till 18 years of age. Of course, IAP says till 5 years, government says till 8 years. And I said till 18 years. It's up to you.
Jaideep, asthma has been described as one of the conditions where, special situations, so children should be given beyond 5 years according to IAP. Reactive airway disease comes by the dozen. So all reactive airway disease should be put in that category?
No, again, the same answer. See, this asthma and reactive airway disease may be precipitated by any viral infection. It's not only influenza, and influenza is one of the viral infection. So when we have a means to protect from influenza, definitely it's done.
Okay. Which time of the year do you all vaccinate? Pre-monsoon. Okay. So there is a time when you get both NH and SH, right? There are those 2 months when you get both, and one is cheaper. Correct? So what do? Use the cheaper one or use the newer one? अरे यार पैसा बचाओ. Latest, okay. And this year started in November. So next year in November or in May?
May.
For Mumbai.
Shift to May.
सर आपने तो बोला था once a year है, अभी आप 6 महीने में बुला रहे हो.
कोई बात नहीं ना, इसको
Subsequent year कर दो. Subsequent year we continue in May only.
You have given 1 dose NH. A dose of NH has been given, now SH is available. What do you do?
No, SH, depending on the area
No, in
where
the
you're staying.
same
Which
year
day?
he's meaning.
Same year, second.
SH.
Use the latest vaccine, whether first dose, second or both the doses, because you are giving 2 doses in a children below 9 years is to prime the immune system. It doesn't matter which serotype you have used. So if it's a bad idea that you gave one NH at a time when SH was going to be available, but yes, if the reasons are compelling, do that, no issues.
Any questions from the audience on any topic? Just 1 or 2 questions. Yeah, please.
Suppose a child has taken an influenza vaccine 1 dose and doesn't come for the second dose after 1 month and happens to appear after 1.5 years or maybe. So do we have to give 2 doses then? Or
so first of all, everyone needs only 1 dose of influenza vaccine subsequent years. Is only the first time a child below 9 years needs priming, so needs 2 doses in the same season. Now if he has taken 1 dose and doesn't comes after 2 years, he is not primed well. So he should be primed again with 2 doses, as considering that is the first time, and then subsequently 1 dose.
Thank you, sir.
So for people to know, there's also one live intranasal cold adapted vaccine which is available against influenza. It goes off and out, in and out, but now is again available through Serum Institute of India, but not directly through their subsidiary branch which is known as MyLab. MyLab was very common during COVID time for testing. Yeah. So they are the ones who have the live vaccine. I have never used it. I mean, I have taken once before, but I have never used it thereafter. But it's just for the sake of completion that vaccine is again available through Serum Institute.
My question to you, I mean, I understand that WHO said it is one of the, discarded, only 3% efficacy.
Not at all. That was in past. Now
so
again,
would you still prefer a third?
Yes. So last 3 seasons, CDC also says that live vaccine is equally good as the inactivated vaccine. In fact, before it went into disrepute, live was preferred over killed in children. So you can't disregard that.
There
vaccine.
are a lot of restrictions for the live vaccine. With all
so
immunocompromised age restrictions.
Of 20 patients you gave influenza vaccine in your clinic in last 1 month, how many were immunocompromised or above 50 or below 2 years? None, right? So generally both are available is the answer, but yes, you have to know the restriction of using each vaccine.
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
Prashant Babu, breastfeeding is the best. That is we know. Now next you ask.
Thank you so much. 2 quick questions. We talked about the adjacent areas for Japanese encephalitis, but people do travel and travel for long periods, so that whether that should be taken into
any
consideration.
traveler going to a JE endemic area and staying there for more than 2 weeks and excursioning into areas where exposure is possible, like jungle excursion, staying in interiors of villages, etc. Yes, you should give them before they leave.
Okay. Second question, we just talked about the outside reaction of BCG. But quite a few times I have seen no scar outside or no mark outside, but a small lymph node which suggests that BCG has been given. So whether that also should become a considering point.
So that's, as they said, that's okay, yeah. Fine. So I think we'll stop here. So I think everyone agrees, including politicians, that prevention is better than cure. Agreed?
Politicians do not, because they can't, their bread will not be there. So
But this was a signboard outside a politician's speech. So they also thought prevention is better than cure. So please go ahead and vaccinate, and do not worry about reducing patient inflow because you have prevented too many diseases, because as long as patients diagnose themselves on the internet, we will still get patients. Thank you very much, audience, for excellent interaction, and thank you, panelists, for not confusing us.
Also, thank you to Bharat Biotech for their unrestricted scientific grant for this discussion. We go ahead with our next talk, and I have made a small poem on it. Congested eyes, fever high, body in shock, all systems paralyze. Platelets dip at an all-time low. Have mercy, oh dengue, you evil foe. Scientists, researchers are wrecking their brains to find a vaccine that can refrain. Oh dengue, you shall no more shock. With Q-Denga vaccine, we will rock. So we have with us Dr. Kasi to explain us and tell us more about this highly awaited vaccine Q-Denga.
Right. So, malaria, the next disease is dengue. The common factor is the mosquito, although they may be of different species. This is a sponsored talk by Takeda, but I must admit that they gave me complete freedom to make my own slide set. So I'm going to talk exclusively about the new vaccine. They do not want the brand name to be mentioned, so I've just mentioned TAC 003, which is actually Q-Denga, the vaccine, which you are all so eagerly awaiting for. Why do we need this vaccine in our country? This is a recent data of a meta-analysis of dengue incidents all over the world, done from an institution from China. India is tops, whether you look at the AIDS standardized incidence ratio or AIDS standardized death rate. India tops the list, we are in the red. Almost 36 districts, states, union territories have reported dengue. We have had a surge of dengue in recent years, and in fact in 2022, we had the maximum number of reported dengue cases, which was almost about 240,000 cases. Is there any quantification of the dengue burden in our country? This was a large study, sero-survey study done, which was an ICMR project, 240 clusters, 12,300 individuals in 3 age groups. And what did that show? One, seroprevalence increases with age. Older you are, more chances that you have got infected with dengue, symptomatic or asymptomatic. Seroprevalence varies with your position in the country. The maximum was in the south, next was western region, then came the northern, and then the northeastern. Northeastern was one of the lowest. It was less than 5% sero incidence. Third, it was higher in urban areas compared to rural areas, which we all know. It was equal in males and females, no gender specificity. And unlike some of the study areas where these vaccines were done, India, the dengue virus is very cosmopolitan. All the 4 dengue types have been described in our country. So implication is, if we really want it to work, we need a vaccine which is going to work quite well against all the 4 serotypes and not something that is specific for 1 or 2 serotypes. One we must consider is that what is the incidence of asymptomatic dengue? And studies have shown that on an average it is around 60%. It is much more during outbreaks. less in the intermediate season. In a sero survey done in Kerala, they found that 90% of the dengue positives didn't even know that they had dengue. So we have a very large population of asymptomatic dengue. This has lot of public health significance and the use of vaccines as well. Now, what are the challenges with the dengue? Unlike mosquito, this is a single virus. You don't have too much of genetic diversity. But the problem is you require humans because there are no animal models. Remember, antibody dependent enhancement. That's why dengue vaccine, the first vaccine, went into disrepute. There are no immune correlates. So you have to do clinical studies for every single vaccine. And you require a vaccine which will work against 4 serotypes which have very less cross protection against each other. You are going to have a vaccine which is going to be effective for virology confirmed dengue, hospitalized dengue, death due to dengue, so many parameters. So in general, making a dengue vaccine has been quite a difficult process. So let's now come to the brass tacks about TAC 003 or Qdenga. Now, this vaccine is based on the dengue 2, which has been genetically modified with mutations at 3 points. So the dengue 2 is same. They have removed the PRM and E protein of dengue 2, inserted dengue 1, dengue 3, dengue 4, and thus you have a, you can't call this as a chimeric vaccine, but a sort of a recombinant vaccine where you have changed between the same virus only. So unlike dengue vaccine where it had a yellow fever base, this vaccine had a dengue base itself. This vaccine has been shown to elicit all 3 arms of the immune system. The innate, because it has produced a lot of these cytokines. It has stimulated the B cell response because you have high titers of antibodies. You have antibodies against NS1 also. You have type-specific memory cells. There has been demonstration of memory cells as well with this vaccine. And there's a lot of simulation of the T cells also, indicating that this vaccine stimulates all 3 arms of the immune response. The pivotal studies for this particular vaccine was a very large study which involved close to 30,000 subjects, very wide age range from 1.5 to 60 years. I'm talking about all the phases, not just phase 3. 13 countries, both dengue endemic and non-endemic, 88 sites spread across the world. US, it was there in Africa, it was there in the European countries, and a strong presence in Asian countries, South Asian countries, and 19 clinical trials. The WHO had specifically laid down certain parameters for dengue vaccine trials. You have to have a large study, large base, large number of subjects. You have to have stratified data regarding the efficacy endpoints based on the serostatus and the age. You require a reasonably good period of follow-up so that you know what is the waning of immunity or waning of protective efficacy. Based on these parameters, satisfying all these parameters, the TAC 003 clinical studies were done. Now let us concentrate on the phase 3 study, which is most important for us. This was divided into 3 parts. In the first part, at the end of 1 year, they looked at the overall efficacy. At the end of 18 months, that is into the second year, they looked at some of the secondary efficacy endpoint. Then they had a reanalysis of data at 2 years, 3 years, and 4.5 years, or 57 months to be very precise, where they looked at many other exploratory endpoints. And ultimately, a small cohort of those between 4 and 11 years received a booster to look at what is going to happen to these efficacy points. This data is still not ready. So let's now consider each one. Right. Now, 12 months data, efficacy against virologically confirmed dengue, irrespective of serostatus, that is overall was 80.2%, and the viral distribution was same in the vaccine and in the placebo cohort, indicating rather a broad-based protection, active against all the serotypes. When you look at stratify the results according to the serostratus, not a very great difference between seropositive and seronegative at the end of 12 months. Unlike dengue vaccine where the difference was very, very wide. If you look at virally confirmed dengue with hospitalization, seropositive, seronegative, no significant difference. If you look at region specific, this study, phase 3 was done in about 8 countries, Latin America and Southeast Asia. There was no difference according to the place where the studies were done. And if you look at the age-wise efficacy, it showed that the efficacy was almost similar, although numerologically it was much higher beyond the age of 6 years. 4 to 5 years, somehow the efficacy was little lower. We'll come to that a little later on. Overall efficacy against dengue hemorrhagic fever, overall was rather disappointing. Good numerically, but statistically you had negative confidence interval. If you look at the efficacy against severe virologic confirmed dengue, again 58%, but very, very wide confidence intervals. Now what happens at 18 months? 18 months, 90.4 efficacy against hospitalized virologically confirmed dengue. Again, the distribution was almost similar, suggesting that the protection against all the 4 serotypes were almost similar. Now, if you look at other parameters, virology confirmed dengue, seropositive 76.1, seronegative 66.2. Now the differences are beginning to appear. If you look at hospitalized virology confirmed dengue, again you find 91.4, 88.1%. Not much of a difference. If you look at the age-specific vaccine efficacy, if you take the overall age group, there is a little difference between seropositive and seronegative. If you take the 4 to 5 years, you find that the difference is much more, and 4 to 5 years in the seronegative, you have negative values. 6 to 11 years, similar. 12 to 16 years, similar. So this vaccine is not as useful in 4 to 5 years as it is in the older age group. Next, let's look at the efficacy against individual serotypes. This is the 18 months data. Dengue 1, overall seropositive, seronegative, not much of a difference. Serotype 2, excellent. Since this had a serotype 2 base, and all the other 3 also had some NSP, non-structural proteins of dengue 2, you had the best response to serotype 2. Serotype 3, overall and seropositive, yes, but look at what happened to the seronegative. Right at the end of 18 months, the efficacy went down dramatically. And if you look at serotype 4, in the study areas over 4 to 5 years, there were very, very few cases of serotype 4. So the efficacy against serotype 4 could not be estimated in this study. They are now looking at extension of the study, looking at post-marketing surveillance to see what will be the efficacy against serotype 4 and even serotype 3. Now, what is the efficacy at 18 months against hemorrhagic fever and hospitalization? Again, very, very low results in the seronegative, and even if you look at the age distribution, it is very low in the 4 to 5 years age group. So the difference between seropositive and seronegative, though not as wide as the previous vaccine, still is appearing now. Now, let's look at the 3 years data now. 3 years, overall virally confirmed dengue was 62%, hospitalization was 83%. Now, if you look at the individual, you will find dengue 2 is very good, dengue 1 reasonably good, but if you look at dengue 3 and 4 in the seronegative, practically no protection. Again, if you look at hospitalized virology confirmed dengue, dengue 1, dengue 2 fine, but seronegative you cannot estimate because there were very few numbers. So these vaccines may be working against serotype 4, but we don't have data. because there were no cases in the study area at that time. Now we come to the last long term, 54 to 57 months. That is 4.5 years data. What does the 4.5 years data show? If you look at virologically confirmed dengue, overall 61.2%, seronegative 53%, seropositive 64%. Reasonably good. If you look at the cumulative index incidence of virally confirmed dengue, you will find that the difference is very significant between the placebo and the vaccinated group. It becomes a little narrower as time progresses, but even here it is higher, the incidence is lower in those who were seropositive versus those who were seronegative. If you look at hospitalized virology confirmed dengue, overall 84%. Remember, for any viral vaccines, as the disease endpoint becomes more and more severe, the efficacy increases. The same happened with COVID vaccines as well. Seropositive 86%, seronegative around 80%. Even here, the difference is much wider, but there is a significant difference between seropositive and the seronegatives. Now, if you look at the efficacy against virology confirmed dengue between of the four pertaining to all the four serotypes, you will find that the vaccine is most effective for seropositive. In the seronegative, it is reasonably effective against serotype 1 and 2, but as far as 3 and 4 is concerned, the data favors placebo rather than the vaccine. So probably at this end point, the vaccine is not going to work. Now, if you look at hospitalized VCD, similar results. Dengue 3, dengue 4, seronegative, not very useful. Okay. Now, this data was overall from the beginning of the study till 4.5 years. Now, what happens in the last phase, 16 to 18 months? See, that is where you can know what the waning is like, how significant is the waning. Here, if you look at the figures, it has come down to 55.7%, the last 16 to 18 months. So, from 80% it has come down to 55.7%. Negative values for the seronegative. So, in the last 16 to 18 months, rather 14 to 17 months, seronegative against virological confirmed dengue, statistically insignificant protection. If you look at the protection against the different serotype, seropositive 1, 2 and 3 yes, seronegative 1 yes, but 2, 3 and 4 no. Even against dengue 4, in the seropositive, no data because no dengue 4 cases. May or may not work. Right. Looking at hospitalized VCD, overall 93.7%, very good efficacy in the seropositive, but coming to seronegative, it could not be estimated because too few numbers of clinical endpoints were there in the study. If you look at the serotype specific also, the only place where this vaccine works in the last phase is against dengue 1 seropositive. In all the others, the efficacy could not be estimated. So, to summarize all these findings, all serotypes, this vaccine was efficacious against all serotypes in baseline seropositive recipients, and in seronegative baseline, it was effective against 1 and 2, but against 3 and 4, the efficacy was very, very marginal. Exploratory data suggests, it was not a primary endpoint, suggests that efficacy against dengue 3 in baseline seronegative is very negligible. But again, analysis is incomplete. We don't say it's not effective. It is not estimatable because certain factors like incidence of the clinical endpoints, number of cases were very few. So we require further assessment to look at the efficacy of this vaccine over a longer term in seronegative population, and that is what the post-marketing surveillance is going to do. What about the safety of this vaccine? Something very paramount before introduction of any new vaccine. Now, this is an analysis of the solicited systemic adverse effects in those less than 6 years and those above 6 years. Now, the red and the brown are for the vaccine. The green colored bars are for the placebo. Drowsiness, not much of, the first thing is severe side effects were very, very less, or more than 90% were minor. Between the vaccine and placebo, drowsiness, not much of a difference, irritable fussibility, some difference, others there was no difference. Even in those above 6 years, the vaccine was a little more reactogenic, but again, not much of difference between the vaccine and the placebo. Now, if you look at the severe adverse effects, whether in the incidence was about 4.9% in the vaccine, 5.7% in the placebo in the baseline seronegative, in the baseline seropositive 5% and 6%, almost similar. So seropositive, seronegative, there was no differences in the adverse effect profile with this particular vaccine. If you take the overall safety data, comparable any essays, any severe adverse effects, definitely more with the vaccines compared to placebo, solicited local adverse, fever, pain, swelling, etc. Systemic, not much of a difference, unsolicited, not much of a difference. So overall, comparable to placebo except for the local reactogenicity between the vaccine and the placebo. What about the immunogenicity? We know there is no correlate of protection, but there has been a long-term follow-up of the immunogenicity profile also. Now, the solid lines are the vaccine and the dotted lines are the placebo. Green is dengue 1. The green is dengue 1, the red is dengue 2, and then you have dengue 3 and dengue 4. Now, in the seropositive, there is a definite fall in the antibody titers. Throughout the period of the study, antibody titers were highest for serotype 2, followed by serotype 1, and then serotype 4 and 3 and 4. In the seronegative, there was persistence of high antibody titers, but they were much less than those in the seropositive. And a similar pattern, highest titers with serotype 2, next serotype 1, and then 3 and 4. So, to conclude, this vaccine has been licensed after a very, very robust WHO acceptable clinical development program. Overall vaccine efficacy against virological confirmed dengue at 12 months was 80%, hospitalized dengue 90%, sustained long-term protection against hospitalized VCD of 84%, and symptomatic virally confirmed dengue of 61%. There has been no report of antibody-dependent enhancement with this vaccine during the period of the study. Post-marketing surveillance is going to look at it further, whether there's any increased incidence during following longer use. Very large study, no significant safety signals, safe vaccine. This vaccine, we are we are very, very eagerly waiting for it. I think the dengue season has begun. I don't know Mumbai, but Bangalore it has begun. They reported over 1,000 cases of dengue in the past 10 days. And believe me, Saturday I worked only half a session and I had 6 dengue positive cases in just my morning session. And it's the practice with most of the pediatricians in Bangalore today. This vaccine is licensed in Indonesia, European Union. There's no upper age limit. In fact, I forgot to mention there has been an immunobridging study till for 65 years. And this vaccine has been shown to be non-inferior even in the older age group. Norway, UK, Argentina, Brazil, Colombia, Thailand, Malaysia, Vietnam. This vaccine was WHO pre-qualified in May 2024. With that, there is a hope that it will be introduced in the NIPs of many of the Gavi eligible countries. And I'm sure everyone in the audience will be eagerly awaiting for this particular vaccine. From my talk with the Takeda people, probably late 2025 or early 2026. We have to wait for that long. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for that informative and crisp session on the dengue vaccine. For all of those who are, going out, let me tell you that this is the most awaited session of the afternoon. we all know that we are evolving every day from our hunter-gatherer past to, artificial intelligence now. But interestingly to note, which there has been research done by the Oxford as well as the Princeton University on baboons. And they have found that even the baboons are evolving. They have found that the baboons are taking their own decisions, doing that democratically and not just following the dominant animal. So, today, for this keynote address, who better than our eminent Dr. Nitin Shah sir, a pioneer in vaccinology and hemato-oncology, to open the D for doors of wisdom, which will help in D for decision making about the acellular versus the whole cellular pertussis vaccine in beyond baboons.
This is the most recent photograph taken 8 months back. But anyway, all my photographs are the same because I have stopped aging. And I'm still eligible for distributing knowledge, not for anything else. All right, so I think, I mean, we heard the WP priming story, and the only difference of opinion me and Dr. Kasi have is on this AP versus WP, and I have been single-handedly fighting about this AP vaccine vis-a-vis WP. So my aim is not to convince you to use one versus the other, but telling you just the scientific facts about both the vaccine. So, of course, these are my declaration that I work for vaccine manufacturers which make either WP or AP. So in that sense, I will be unbiased. So WP vaccines have worked wonders since introduction. There is no question about that. So if the patient is comfortable and you are comfortable with WP vaccine, that's the end of the story. You can leave and take your lunch. But if you are going to use AP vaccine, then the question comes. That is, the parents want it, you want it, both of you want. Are you giving an inferior vaccine? And that is what I'm going to address in the next 30-40 minutes. So AP vaccines have been painted as the culprit for not so very recent resurgence of pertussis in the developed world, especially US, UK, Australia and some of those countries. That too, not the entire country, some part of those countries. And the hypothesis that was built when these outbreaks happened somewhere in 2010 and 11, and we are now in 24, so that's almost like 13 years back, was that the AP vaccines have poor efficacy. Some experts in the past used to say that they are as good as saline. AP vaccines have early waning of immunity, so your protection stops after 5 years since the last dose. AP vaccines lead to Th2, Th1 immune response rather than Th1, Th17. So Th2 versus Th1 story was being played to say that that's the reason why all this is happening, because if you have a Th1 response, then you have a sterilizing immunity, and that was entirely based on this baboon experiment, and that's the reason why I titled my talk as Beyond Baboon, as to tell you to what happens in humans. So when you are sterilizing immunity, obviously you will also stop transmission, besides benefit of the vaccine to the vaccine himself, and the type of antibody response that is generated. Dr. Nehal also alluded about IgG1, IgG2, 3, 4, and that if you have IgG4 antibodies, then with the incremental doses, then that's detrimental as compared to WP, which leads to no IgG4 response. So these are the 4 or 5 facts or myths that I want to dispel in the next 30 minutes. So, and the last, of course, WP priming is better and is as safe. So like if you give 6, 10, 14 weeks, some study done in UK in two decades back showed that the safety was the same. So that's what I want to show you. What is the recent meta-analysis of if we use WP in 6, 10, 14 weeks vis-a-vis AP vaccine. So the entire world came to a halt about AP vaccine when 2010 California outbreak happened, and this is the data that is captured in USA right from 1947 when we were liberated from the British rule till 2007 and 2010. So you can see what are the number of pertussis cases that used to be in 1947, and you compare the cases in 2010 in California when the outbreak happened, the cases were almost the same. Even when actually the population had increased, which means you were expecting, if the AP vaccine were not going to be as good, you would have expected more cases because the population has doubled or tripled. But that didn't happen. That itself tells you that the AP vaccines work. But anyway, this was the reason why it was said that, okay, you are almost back to no vaccine era and the pertussis cases are rising. That led WHO to publish a paper. They asked some 19 high and middle income country which have an ongoing pertussis surveillance before any pertussis vaccine, during WP, then switch to AP, etc., to say what has happened to pertussis in their countries since 2010 resurgence in California. Now 5 out of these 19 countries actually said that they have resurgence. The remaining 14 did not have resurgence. Most of these 14 countries were from European area where there is very high coverage of the pertussis vaccine in children, and all of them were using AP vaccine. Now of the 5 which had resurgence, 4 were exclusively using AP vaccine, but 1 was also exclusively using WP vaccine. So it's not that there were no countries with WP vaccine which did not have resurgence in this 2010 and 11 era. Now let's look at those countries which showed resurgence. The first country, USA, AP using, showing resurgence, and again you can see the resurgence showed that the pertussis was more in adolescents who had received more than 5 years since the last DTAP, and that's the whole basis behind that there is waning of immunity, and then the AP vaccine stopped working after 5 years in the last dose. But we don't realize that the diagnosis during WP vaccine era and diagnosis during AP vaccine era is different. I mean, diagnosis during WP era was clinical diagnosis, serological diagnosis, whereas diagnosis during AP era is PCR based diagnosis, which is going to overdiagnose. So there is one paper, we looked at the severity of the pertussis during the resurgence era in USA, and it showed that most of these adolescent pertussis had just cough for 1 week, no pertussis cough, no vomiting, no weight loss, nothing to suggest a severe pertussis. In fact, they were all subjected to PCR and came positive, so they were labeled as pertussis. How many of have been coughing again and again? We don't know how many of were actually pertussis when we are living in a country where only WP is used. But anyway, we will take the USA story again after some time. Let's first take it Portugal, which was the second AP using country that time, and it also had shown a resurgence, but mainly in young infants. So if you look at the age distribution, then you can see the main culprit was this sudden resurgence in blue line, which is below 1 year, as compared to adolescent adult, which was almost a flat line. So again, children who are too young to be immunized, they were the ones which were having pertussis. So third is England and Wales, again resurgence. This time you look at the peak of the resurgence in red line below 3 months. They would have not been benefited by any vaccine because you need complete 3 doses, and UK uses 2, 3 and 4 months. So by 5th month only there will be some protection, whereas you see these were very young babies. So again, too young babies to actually blame the AP vaccine alone. And the last country which was WP using was Chile. Now again, we don't want to blame WP vaccine here as much as we don't want to blame the AP vaccine in the previous countries, is because here you can see the vaccine coverage had dropped in the last 1 or 2 years from a high of 91.3% to 77%. So pertussis prevention is not only which vaccine you use, but actually what percentage of coverage you have in your area, and that is going to actually benefit. So even here the drop in vaccine coverage was the real culprit. So let's come back to California outbreak, and this is what was the outbreak I showed you. And they did the analysis of the age distribution of this pertussis casing during that outbreak, and it showed that the peak you can see here is in the adolescents. Okay, they are almost like 10 or 12 or 14 years old, and these are the number of DTAP vaccines that were used. So people who had used exclusively DTAP are the ones who are highest pertussis, and those who are more than 5 years since the last dose were the ones with highest pertussis, besides the young ones you can see here below 1 year who are anyway too young to benefit because of vaccination. And compare that with the children who are more than 12 years, so they were like 15, 20, 25 years, they were all had only WP vaccine. So it was very easy to say, oh look at here, WP vaccinated people did not have pertussis, AP using vaccines, AP vaccine using subjects had pertussis. So the further analysis was done on the PCR positive pertussis based on what they had received. So there were a subject who had received 4 DTAP or 4 DTWP. There were subject who had received mixed DTWP or DTAP, and they were compared with only 4 DTWP. And you can see here, based on the control that you use, overall there was 3 to 5 fold higher incidence of pertussis in those who received only DTAP compared to those who had received DTWP. And if in a mixed schedule again, if you see, the incidence fell to 3-fold higher because they had received at least 1 dose of DTWP. Very easy to say you had given WP, then you get less pertussis. All right. And then they compared further in older children whether they had received Tdap or they had not received Tdap. And again you can see here, if they had not received Tdap, the chances of pertussis was 9 to 16-fold higher as compared to those who received Tdap, which was still 4-fold higher. So if you had given a recent pertussis containing vaccine in the form of Tdap, then probably the incidence of pertussis is lower. So this was the reason behind the doubts created about the AP vaccine efficacy in the countries in the Western world. Now, Dr. Witt's group did a further analysis. They did age distribution from 8 to 20 years in only AP dose vaccinees and those who received at least one WP dose vaccinees. Now, when you compare children of AP versus WP, necessarily you can see here the younger children that received only AP because they were young and there a switch had already happened as compared to only WP where you can see hardly any cases were there. Because you look at the population, 21,000, 20,000 till 13 years, 11,000 as compared to few hundred cases in a WP setup. So you are not comparing two different vaccines, you are comparing two different era because there were younger children here in AP and older children here with WP. And you know, when you have more age, you have more boosting. So obviously if you have used any vaccine, if you have more boosting, your incidence of pertussis drops. So now you can see here, if you take instead of this 0 case, add 1 case, alright, so that then this is the average incidence of pertussis in different age group. By just adding instead of 0, 1 case, you can see here the age incidence becomes actually in favor of AP compared to WP in children who are 8 to 13 years. So you can see here 267 versus 2000, 323 versus 2005 versus 1000 and so on and so forth. So by just tweaking your statistics, because you are not able to compare two different ages because they were born in different era of use of vaccine, you cannot just make any such simplicity of AP is better or WP is better, etc. When you are not able to compare in the same time period two different vaccines. And I will come to this later where there is a country where you could actually compare AP with WP at the same time and in a significant number of subjects. All right. And that led to this paper which was actually older than the 2011 outbreak, which actually is from USA, right from 1998 to 2001, where someone had studied vaccine effectiveness across 3 or 4 valid WP or DTIP cases compared to no vaccination. So you're not comparing two vaccines, you're comparing both the vaccine to no vaccination. And you find that whether you take an old DTWP, efficacy was 95%, mixed DTIP-WP 94%, only DTAP 95% with 3 valid dose, and same way with the 4 valid dose, you can see it's 96, 98 and 96. Which means there were paper from USA itself which showed that irrespective of what you have used, if you compare them with no vaccination, both the vaccines were doing equally well. Anyway, this is the paper which came after California outbreak looking at the effectiveness of 5 DTAP doses starting from the first year after the last dose till more than 5 years. So at 6th year the efficacy was 88.7%, 7th year 98, then 95, 92, and even after 5 years later it was still 71%. And we know from the double-blind randomized control trial done on AP vaccine in any part of the world, at best the efficacy is 70 to 80% against severe pertussis, never 100%. And in fact, those comparative data when they use WP vaccine, some of the WP vaccine had efficacy as low as 50%. Of course, those are not the vaccine we use here. In fact, there is no efficacy data with WP vaccine which we are using in India, but there is no reason to believe that they are not working because we have almost stopped seeing pertussis since the time we have been vaccinating children with WP vaccine. All right, and the second paper which actually was the reason to believe that at least one dose of WP is better than no dose of WP at all is this paper from Dr. Sherdian from Australia. What they looked in the outbreak which happened in Australia is that they looked at pure DTAP primary course versus pure DTWP as a reference, and you can see the incidence of pertussis during that Australia outbreak was 3.24 higher in DTAP vaccine versus pure DTWP. And if you had at least one dose of WP as the first dose, it was 1.7 fold higher, and if you had used first dose at DTAP, it was 3.6 fold higher. Again telling you that if you use at least one dose of WP, especially as the first dose, it was much better than using other sources including pure DTAP. So this was done in the era where they were giving only 3 primary and no toddler booster at all. And that too, the 3 primary coverage for the AP vaccine was only 69.5%. And what did Australia do after this study? They reintroduced booster dose at 15 to 18 months and not change from AP to WP vaccine. All right, why all this happens? Because even natural infection doesn't lead to lifelong immunity. You see, the immunity is at best for 10 to 20 years. With WP vaccine, it is around 10 to 12 years. With AP vaccine, is around 5 to 6 years. So yes, there is shortened protection after AP vaccine compared to WP. But if you take your timely doses of primary first booster, second booster, and the Tdap at 10 years, and then a Tdap at 16 to 20 years, as is the practice in many European countries, you have really no worry about pertussis outbreak or pertussis breakthrough infection in pure AP vaccinated children. And it's not that during AP area only there were pertussis outbreak. This is same USA before switching from WP to AP somewhere in 1990 to 2000, studying a decade before the switch where only WP were used, and they said that in this paper there were more than 10 outbreaks with more than 100 cases and a single outbreak in the Kansas area where more than 1000 cases of pertussis happened, and this was all happening during the WP era. And not only there, in Chicago, in Cincinnati, Nova Scotia, Vermont, Netherlands, Pakistan, all these outbreaks which are there from 1990 to 2011 are in era or in the countries using only the wholesale vaccine. So what could be the reasons behind this whole confusion that has been created since the 2000 outbreak? Increased awareness? Yes. Improved testing? Definitely. Like Dr. Yevle mentioned about the meningococcal vaccine, if you are given a single dose of penicillin containing antibiotic, your culture will become negative. But the same CSF, if you subject to PCR for meningococcal, the yield improves from 4% to 40%. The same thing will happen with any disease that you have PCR based diagnosis, it will diagnose more cases. Change in the circulating strain, there was some confusion about that, but that's now believed that that's not true. The strains have remained almost the same. Waning immunity and IgG4 response, which is seen with AP more than the WP, may be one of the reasons. Lower and shorter duration, definitely yes. Tdap vaccine not that great, so yes. But anyway, adolescent pertussis is much milder as compared to infant pertussis. What we are worried in using pertussis vaccine is to prevent pertussis in the first 1 or 2 years of life, where a child can die of pertussis because of severe complication. All right, let's take it further to these IgG4, waning immunity, etc., which essentially comes from trials done in baboons. So this is number of pertussis cases in Mexico from 2000 to 2019. And somewhere in 2007, they switched to AP vaccine. And you can see the outbreak which happened essentially between 2012 to 15. And this is the vaccine coverage for first dose, second dose, third dose, and the fourth dose. And you can see here the time when there were outbreaks is a time when there was a massive decrease in the coverage from as high as 95% to as low as 80%. So again reiterating the fact that pertussis prevention is not about the vaccine that you use, it's about the coverage of the primary and the booster doses in your community. So because of this, it led to a paper which is published in 2023 to look at the effectiveness of WP and AP vaccine in Mexico at the same time, in the same population, in the same era. Unlike in USA where they compared not apple with apple but apple with oranges. So this was a retrospective analysis using national database to study number of clinically diagnosed or laboratory confirmed pertussis cases in 6 to 48-month-old children from 2000 to 2019. So WP based combination vaccine were used since 1999 in 3+1 schedule. That was the booster was given at 24 months, not 18 months. Then they switched to a 2-component AP based combination vaccine from 2007 in 3+1, but with an earlier booster at 18 months, which is the standard of care in our day-to-day practice. And they looked at the vaccine efficacy for primary doses in 6.5 months to 18.5 months to 24 months old children, and study of the fourth dose, which was given either at 18 or 24 months thereafter in the age group up to 4 years of age. And what they found was the vaccine effectiveness, whether it was WP, which is in pink, or AP, which is in the green for the clinical or laboratory diagnosed cases, either 3 primary doses or the 4 doses together, you can see whatever color bar you look at, whether you take the WP vaccine clinical or laboratory, or you take AP clinical laboratory, you can see the efficacy or the effectiveness was almost the same, more than 95%, because the vaccine coverage was very high. So this is a study which actually shows you back to back same time vaccine effectiveness of WP versus AP in vaccine. This is a very recent study published in 2023. Okay, you can say that this is because the vaccine worked till 5 years after the last dose. So there is nothing to choose between the two vaccines when it comes to it. The only problem is beyond 5 years. So this is a study done from Poland. Again, this is a 2021 paper. As in US study, the recipients were not age matched. While comparing preschool versus adolescents who were older, Poland did this study. In 1960, they started a WP vaccine in 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months, that is 3 primary, and a booster at 16 to 18 months, and later on they introduced another booster of AP at 5 to 6 years. In 1999, AP vaccine introduced, and by 2013, both AP and WP were used in 60 to 40% ratio. So you had a simultaneous AP WP use in a good proportion. 60-40 is a good proportion to study what happens to the immunological study which is done for long years in these two vaccines. And overall, again, you look at the 4 doses coverage, very high, 95% by the age of 3 years. So they took 5 to 15-year-old children who had completed 5 doses of pertussis vaccine, enrolled in 11 centers. They did the anti-PT IgG antibody, which is the real protective antibody, and they took some cutoff to define whether they are seroconverted or no. They took 2,700 children enrolled for this study, of which 42% had received 4 WP and a booster of AP. 48% received all 4 AP and a primary and also the booster as AP. So WP AP followed or AP AP, and 9.5% received mixed schedule of AP and WP. And they looked at the immunological IgG anti-pertussis toxin antibody at 5 to 6 years, and you can see here the solid balls are the AP1 and the open balls are the WP, and you can see the 11 years long-term immunostatus shows that the data is overlapping, which means there was no difference between AP versus WP on the anti-PT antibody. And you can see this is the year since the school entry booster. So 1 year after the 5 years booster, second up to 15 years they have followed up. And again you can see AP versus WP, there is no statistical significant difference. So on immunity waning, what is believed early waning, at least not reflecting on the anti-PT antibody, followed up to 6 years after the last dose in this recent publication from Poland. Okay, the test of pudding is in eating it. So what will happen if you use AP vaccine in your national program with very high coverage? So this is Sweden, which uses only AP vaccine, and in fact some of the area of Sweden use only a single component AP vaccine, and they looked at the incidence per 100,000 population in children below the age of 1 year, which is in the blue line, and in general population between 1996 before any vaccination till 2020 you can see, and this is followed up to 2012. So you can see here the disease started coming down after AP vaccine was introduced in 1996, and this is very recent. You can see here even in children below 1 year or above 1 year, overall there is hardly any pertussis without using any WP vaccine. So this is the real world data of using AP vaccine in a country with a very high coverage in the national program. Now coming to this IgG subclass response and AP and WP and natural infection, which has been talked about even during the first dialogue session. So you can have total IgG, IgG1, IgG2, IgG3 or IgG4, and even IgE response following vaccination and natural infection, which you can study as far as pertussis is concerned. So these children have received 2, 3, 4 and 11 months early booster and a 4-year booster and a Tdap IPV at 9 years. So they have received total 3 plus 2 booster plus 1 more Tdap, so almost 6 doses, and these children had received either WPAP or APWP in all sorts of combination. And they looked at the response, and what they found that yes, IgG PT, you can see here this is the response for the IgG PT, which is very high in all AP compared to all WP or mixed schedule, because it's a pure vaccine containing pertussis toxin. Same way FHA, the titers are very high, 446 in pure AP versus a WP is again because that's a pure vaccine. And if you look at the IgG 1, 2, 3, 4, then you can see the AP had some IG4. Again, AP had some IG4 for PT as well as for FHA and as well as for the third antigen. So whether this IG4 is going to be troublesome for long-term protection, look at what is the percentage of IG4 in these children. So you can see here the green is IG4, blue is IG1. IgG1 is the main antibody, IgG4 may be detrimental, but you look at any schedule at any age, IgG4 at best is seen in all pure AP, but a very small minuscule. So of say 100% antibodies, almost 80% are still IgG1 and around 5 to 10% IgG4. So IgG4 antibody response is not like they only produce IgG4 and that's why it's not going to protect. So I think that's another myth that I wanted to dispel by this experiment which was done, which showed that yes, there is IgG4 with AP, but it's not the predominant antibody. The predominant antibody is still the IgG1 response. Okay, that brings to me my title of the talk, this baboon, and what was the baboon experiment and what have we learned from that. So baboon, when infected with pertussis, they develop clinical disease like humans. So they develop cough, their counts go high, they have colonization, they have immune response in the form of antibody which peaks by 24 to 26 weeks, they resist reinfection and they also resist transmission to naive baboons. So something like what you want in humans to happen. They develop IgG response following either WP or AP vaccine used in human doses. So again, you are not comparing small doses, you are comparing human doses. Based on this principle, some experiments were done in baboons. So what was the experiment? The first experiment aim was to study the disease pattern, the transmission and the type of immune response in baboons immunized with human dose of AP versus WP given at 2, 4, 6 months, which is very similar to what we use in human, and at 7 months where you would have the antibody protection starting. It was studied in AP vaccinated baboons, WP vaccinated baboons, and in naive and in already past infected convalescent baboons with a pertussis strain which is infective to baboons. And what happens? You can see here WBC count, everything went very high in naive subjects, whereas AP and WB, which are red and blue, and the convalescent which are in green, they have the same type of WBC, which means both the vaccines protected against clinical disease in the form of high WBC count. Okay, what happened to the colonization? The colonization in naive was highest, followed by that in AP and WP. But in AP, the colonization persisted till almost 38 days, whereas in WP, after first 14 days, the colonization dropped. So it's not that the WP vaccinated baboon did not colonize, they also colonized, but they colonized for shorter duration compared to the AP vaccinated or naive baboons which remained for 38 days. Now what would that mean? Would they transmit the disease? So the second model was to look at the colonization leading to transmission. So 2 AP vaccinated, 1 naive and 1 unvaccinated directly challenged baboon were placed in the same cage. All 4 baboons got colonized to the same extent. So AP vaccine did not prevent colonization, but that is true for even WP for the first 2 weeks. AP vaccinated baboons could not prevent asymptomatic colonization. However, the same experiment was not done with WP vaccinated baboons. So it is something which defies logic as to where they studied this transmission etc. in AP vaccinated baboons, why did they not do in a WP vaccinated baboon? Anyway, what happened? The AP vaccinated baboon, they actually transmitted the disease to the naive baboons, but again, this experiment was not done again with WP vaccinated. So this shows that there was transmission in AP vaccinated baboon from baboon to the naive baboon, but the same was not done in the WP vaccinated baboon for some peculiar reason. And lastly, they did the pre and post vaccination titer, and you can see here, as you would expect, because AP is a pure vaccine, the titers are much higher in AP vaccinated than WP vaccinated baboons. So that is true for also humans. And looking at the cellular response, to look at the IL-1, IL-16, TH1, TH2 response, etc. You can see even WP vaccinated, though they showed a good IL-17 response, it was much weaker than in a convalescent baboon. So it's not sacrosanct that WP vaccine behaves like a natural infection when it's come to TH17, Th1 response. What is the Th1 Th17 response? It leads to sterilizing immunity because it leads to decreases the colonization, so it prevents transmission. But these experiments were done using pure AP and pure WP. We know the first generation vaccines like IPV, JE, yellow fever, etc., including influenza vaccine, also induce a lot of TL7 response. And what we use in our day-to-day practice are the combination vaccine OP with IPV and not only AP vaccine. And hence, in humans, whether the same thing what happened in baboon can be replicated is something which has never been proven. This is something which we don't want, and this happens with WP vaccine more often definitely than AP vaccine. So they are more reactogenic, they lead to undesirable local and systemic side effect. That's the reason why you don't use it beyond 7 years of age. WP vaccine, Indian combination vaccines, IP, we have limited studies in India, and WP vaccine from different sources have a wide range of efficacy, where the AP vaccine which are available in world have undergone rigorous field efficacy trial to prove that they are effective. Coming to the safety of the first dose WP priming that we were discussing, so this is a meta-analysis published in 2018 which looked at all the studies of using either WP or AP as the first dose between 81 to 2014. So 47 studies were included from low, middle, upper middle and high income countries, and looked at also some post-marketing surveillance to look at the overall local side effect and systemic side effect in using AP versus WP as the first dose. And you can see here overall local side effect were 4-fold higher in the form of swelling, 4-fold higher for tenderness, 9-fold higher fever, and 1.3 to 3.4 higher drowsiness, anorexia if you use WP as compared to AP as the first dose. And seizures, HHE, which are the rare side effect but they are very dramatic for the parents, were seen in WP studies. In 3 studies there was not a single case with an AP vaccine in this study. So this is a meta-analysis of a huge number of subjects which completely tells you that if you use WP as your first dose, it is going to lead to this type of side effects as we are experiencing in our day-to-day practice. So overall hyperpyrexia is 3 to 8-fold higher with WP. Excessive crying, incessant crying is 4 to 40-fold higher with WP. HHE, where the child has become limp, is 7 to 14-fold higher, and seizures are 4-fold higher with WP vaccine as compared to AP vaccine, which is a well-known fact. So this is the WHO data on pertussis cases world over. As you can see here, after the 2010-12 outbreak which happened, we seem to be coming down in the pertussis cases in the last few years. And you can see that's because the vaccination coverage has been consistently going up world over for the first 3 primary and the booster doses. Now let's look at those countries which had resurgence of pertussis and were using only AP vaccine. USA, they have come down. You can see 2010-11 there was a huge outbreak. They have come down to almost last few cases in 2021 without changing from AP to WP. UK, they had an outbreak in 2011-12. Again you can see here, except for small babies, there is hardly pertussis, so they have come down. Australia, again you can see from an outbreak in 2010, they have come down to the last few cases, and all these 3 countries have come down without switching from AP to WP. It itself tells you that those outbreaks which were there were not related to use of vaccine. Otherwise, the outbreak should have continued since the 2010 till 2024. So 83 countries have introduced AP vaccine in the national schedule. That is not for any other reason but because the vaccines are effective and safe. And this is the introduction of AP vaccine. Since 2000 till 2022, that data I could got. And see, 2010, there were 55 countries, and that's the time when the outbreak happened, all the doubts about AP were created. And today, there are 83 countries using AP vaccine in the national program, which means 28 more countries have introduced AP vaccines since the outbreak started in 2010. And again, these countries have shown their faith in the AP vaccine. Not a single country has switched from AP to WP in last 25 years. So where would I definitely prefer AP or WP? Extreme preterm baby, because I don't want high fever and make them unstable. Those who had any of these serious side effects in the past, AP is better than WP. Those with severe local side effect with previous WP, surely use AP. For boosters above 5 years and at 5 years, AP is preferred. Above 7 years, you can't use WP at all. And parents who demand less pain vaccine, I think there is no reason why we should tell them that no, WP is better than AP and subject them to having painful problems. So in conclusion, several reasons for 2010-11 outbreak. Instead of just blaming the AP vaccine has shown to be much safer than WP vaccine, no doubt about that. Baboon experiments were not done with WP vaccine for transmittability, and they have not been replicated in humans. They use standalone AP and not AP-IPV combination, which can have different connotation, and they have not been replicated in humans, as I said. No countries uses priming with WP as a concept in their NIP, and as I showed, it's going to be as painful as using WP during the other doses. Licensed AP vaccines have undergone field efficacy trial. They have shown excellent efficacy in controlling disease, similar waning between the two vaccines. No country has switched from AP to WP in the last 15 years. More than 38 countries actually switched to AP in spite of the outbreaks in 2010 onwards. So when used in correct schedule and in time, AP vaccines are as safe and effective both in short term and long term as the WP vaccine. So I started with the preamble that if the parents and the patient and the doctors are happy to give WP vaccines, go ahead. They are wonderful vaccine, cost effective, very cheap, no doubt created, go ahead and use it. But if the patient or the doctor or both want to use AP vaccine, are you giving inferior vaccine? I am sure with the data that I showed you on the other side of the story, the answer is no, you are not giving inferior vaccine. It is as good as the WP vaccine in both the short term and in the long term, and definitely much safer vaccine than the WP vaccine. Thank you very much for your patient hearing.